Hi, welcome to another edition of This Issue. My guest this time is Jerry Provencher from Bath, and he's also involved in the Occupy movement. So we're very glad to have Jerry on the show. Jerry, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Why don't we start out with you telling us a bit about yourself?
I was born and raised in Rhode Island to a French working class family. I traveled a little bit. Spent about a year on the road after I got out of college, mostly in the South and Southwest. Educationally, I have a bachelor's degree in business management and a master's degree in education. I've worked in a bunch of different fields. Education, I've worked about 12 years in education, 10 years in the classroom, and a couple of years doing seminars with teachers. I've worked in the shipbuilding industry, worked at Bath Iron Works for 5 years. I worked in the food and beverage industry for about 2 decades and construction for about 2 decades. The last 12 years I've been working self-employed doing custom home renovations.
All right.
That pretty much brings me to where we are now.
All right, good. Well, tell us, why did you get involved in the Occupy movement?
I think I felt similar to lots of other people. I just felt compelled that I needed to do something about what was going on. I think our country is moving in the wrong direction. I think we've lost our way. And I just felt the need to step up. And talking to people at the demonstrations, that's the consensus that I get from people, that they just felt compelled to speak out at what was going on.
Do you think a lot of your friends and neighbors, your casual friendship, people that you have casual friendships with, do you think they share your concerns?
Some do, and a lot of people are really quiet about it. A lot of people are not articulating how they feel about it one way or the other. Certain friends are speaking out and have joined some of the demonstrations. But a lot of people are sitting back and trying to figure out what's going on, I think.
Now, you've been involved in the Brunswick. There's been weekly protests in Brunswick going to the Bank of America. Mm-hmm. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, it's a very loose organization, people from a lot of different backgrounds over the course of the last month or so. And I think people just have felt compelled to do it. Most of the group, I think, has been middle-aged and seniors. We're seeing more involvement with the youth of the area lately. And I think the group in Brunswick is trying to raise awareness, as I think is the national group, about some of the issues that are going on, both locally and nationally.
What's been the response of people on the street and people passing by as you all have been doing these protests in Brunswick?
I think it's been interesting for me personally. And the first week or so that I was there, it was about mixed, half and half. People tooting their horns and waving in support, and other people, with scowls and various gestures indicating lack of support. And over time, it seems to have shifted a little bit. We have a lot fewer oppositional movements and gestures and calls, and more people in support waving and tooting their horn.
Why do you think that changed?
I think people are becoming more aware of the issues and getting more information, and I think that's been the goal of the Occupy movement.
Let's get into that a little bit. Why is it important to you to talk about this growing divide between the rich and the rest of us, what the Occupy movement is calling the 99%?
Yeah. I think it's one of the major factors in what's happening in this country. People talk about the Occupy movement as a bunch of complainers and whiners and people who are trying to shift the income and wealth divisions or the amount of wealth in the country. And in doing research about this and thinking about it, it just reminded me of some of the most important documents in our country, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, talking about a country of we the people, for the people and by the people, which we haven't had for quite a while now in this country.
When you say that, what have we had?
Well, we've had a major shift. One of the criticisms of the Occupy movement is that we're trying to shift the income and the wealth of the country to more people, and we've already had that shift. If you go back to 1949, 1950, over the course of 30 years, from the 50s to the 80s, the income level of the entire country was going up at a fairly steady pace, and everybody was sharing in the wealth of the country. The American dream was really being realized. From the 80s to recent, 2009, 2007 is the last figures that I've seen, there's been an incredible shift to the upper 5 and 1% of the population in terms of wealth accumulation and income. The lowest portion, the lowest quintile, the lowest 20% of the population has actually lost like 7 or 8% of their family income over the last 30 years. I mean, there's been a major, major shift.
And how has that happened? What has been the things that helped that shift happen?
I think there have been a lot of laws. I mean, if you think back 30 or 40 years ago, we had laws being passed that were protecting people, civil rights, stopping wars, the environment, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. All of those things helped to build safety nets for people, build social services for people who needed it, clean up the environment that had been damaged from the Industrial Revolution for 50 years. And in the last 30 years, we've had laws, and especially in the last few years, laws being passed or attempted to be passed that are taking down environmental regulations, that are making it easier for corporations to pay less in taxes, to move jobs overseas, capital gains tax. People pay less taxes on money they get from speculation than somebody does from manufacturing. That seems kind of strange to me.
So basically you're talking about this period in American history of capital reaccumulation, where the big corporate types, the wealthiest, are reaccumulating the money that through a period of years, you're saying, through legislation and other processes and through taxation in America, we've kind of evened the pie out. We've divided the pie up in a more even way, but now that's shifting back.
And corporate taxes, in terms of revenue for the government, in the 30s and 40s, individual income taxes and corporate income taxes were in terms as a percentage of the federal budget, were fairly close, fairly similar, 30 to 40% over that decade. The individual taxes were in the 30 to 40% range. Today, individual income taxes account for 31% of the federal budget. Corporate income taxes in the 30s and 40s were about the same, 30 to 40%. Currently, they're 9%. Corporate income taxes have gone from 30 and 40% to 9% of our federal budget, of the revenues. Many corporations, large corporations, make billions of dollars in profits and pay little or no taxes.
Can you give a couple examples?
I can't off the top of my head. I mean, I've tried to bring as much research and documentation as I can. There's just too many areas to cover to bring them all. Some of the names that come to mind: General Electric, Exxon, some of the energy companies. If we do another show, I'll be happy to bring more information about the specifics.
But that's right. Some of the biggest oil companies are not paying any taxes at all. General Electric not paying taxes. Yeah.
And some like ExxonMobil, when they had the disaster in Alaska, they still haven't paid all of the damages that they were supposed to have paid from that. I mean, the policies and laws in this country have sheltered corporations from being accountable. Accountability is a piece of the focus of the Occupy movement, that we've had little accountability, both in terms of corporate America and also in terms of the Congress.
So do you think the Occupy movement has been successful in kind of redirecting the debate in this country?
I think it's been fascinating to me personally. People say, what's the purpose, or what are the Occupy people trying to do? And I think that I see the Occupy movement as a seed movement that's in the process of growing. I think the occupations were not designed so much, but the goal was to raise awareness of people, to inform people about some of the issues that are really putting a lot of people at risk in this country. And if you think back 2 months ago to when this thing started, how little discussion we were having at the state and federal levels, and how much is happening now. And I think that the movement is about to shift, or in the process of shifting, from a general awareness and informational perspective to more of a specific issue and active action role kind of a focus.
Now, some critics of the Occupy movement say that people like you are engaging in class warfare. How would you respond to that charge?
I don't see it as class warfare. I see it as people standing up for the rights and I mean, if you look at the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, these are the founding documents of our country. They talk about why this country was formed, what the government, how the government was formed, and what it was meant to do. And at this point, we're not doing a lot of those things. We're not providing for the welfare of people. We're not providing for the well-being of ourselves and our posterity. We're not a government of, by, and for the people. Our military is out of control. We have people all over the military personnel stationed all over the world. We have military budgets out of control and no accountability. And we have social services in this country being cut and slashed. LIHEAP is a good example. In Maine, 62,000 people in Maine needed help with fuel assistance last winter. This winter, the budget's been cut almost in half from the federal government. So we're seeing funding. The military budget is a majority of our discretionary spending. I think it's 52% of our discretionary spending. And yet we're cutting the network out for people who really need. Our infrastructure is crumbling. We have people homeless, mentally ill who are on the streets. All of these things that are directed at the majority of the people in this country are being slashed and burned, and yet we're maintaining wars that are unfunded and military bases around the world. Why do we're going to put troops in Australia? There was just a recent meeting where President Obama said we're going to send troops to Australia. Why do we have to put troops in Australia?
Yeah, it's part of our U.S. Current plan to surround China, which is very provocative. Yeah. It's going to be hugely expensive. And in fact, we're borrowing money from China to militarily surround China. Yeah. How long is that going to be sustainable? It's really crazy. Yeah. You know, as you were just saying all this, though, you know what came to my mind? The Pledge of Allegiance, and at the very end, and liberty and justice for all. Excuse me. What do those words, liberty and justice for all, what do they really mean to you?
It goes back to what I was saying about the founding of our country and the premises around which that was built. And one of the reasons that the country was formed in the Declaration of Independence was to establish justice for the citizens that England was not doing. That was to keep control of the military that England was not doing. That taxation for people was fair, which the country was not doing. If you go through and read the Declaration of Independence and look at what the issues that we're experiencing in this country today, there are tremendous similarities. It's to the point of it being scary.
So the new king is the corporations. Would you say that?
I don't think it's not a king. It's a committee. It's, you know, that we have a number of groups, be they political or economic, that have had a tendency over the last 30 years to influence policy decisions and legislation in this country that have amounted to or helped to create an amassing of wealth and power in this country. I mean, if you look at media, if you look at healthcare, if you look at food, it's all being brought down to fewer and fewer corporations that control that, and maximizing profits and disregarding the impacts to a lot of the people around, not just in this country, but around the world.
Yeah, well, I think that's very well said. I think you got it right on. Jerry, how do you feel about the recent police raids in many cities across the country on the Occupy camps?
I think it's fascinating to see that coming out of what's been called the Arab Spring, and the comments that our government makes about other governments and how they're treating their people, and then to look at what's happening in this country, where peaceful demonstrators are being pepper sprayed and batoned and forcibly evicted from locations. I read an article recently that when Mayor Bloomberg evicted the occupiers at Zuccotti Square in the middle of the night that there was a airspace blackout for media helicopters. They couldn't come in and videotape what was going on. They blocked off subway stations in the area so people couldn't get in or out, and they held the media back from the Zuccotti Park so they couldn't film and report on what was going on. I mean, is that a democracy in action? What's going on there where violence is being perpetrated on nonviolent citizens, demonstrating in a nonviolent manner on public grounds, and for a major city to do that kind of attack in the middle of the night with those kinds of barriers just hurts the credibility, I think, of a democracy in action.
What about the cities saying that the camps are not safe because many homeless people and many mentally ill people have gone into these camps, and so that they have to go in there for public safety and remove these people out of there? How did you respond to that?
It was interesting. There was recently a forum at Bowdoin College, attended by about 120 people, and there was a young woman there who had gone down to Zuccotti Park from Bowdoin and spent 3 days and 3 nights there. And she came back and was very articulate and very eloquent about what she witnessed there. And she talked about how the Occupy movement is not just highlighting, but bringing to light and bringing to awareness for more people the situation of homelessness in this country, of mental illness in this country, of incarceration in this country. These people are being thrown away by our society. They have no place to go. And I think they have just as much of a right to be protesting or demonstrating in their own behalf as anybody else. I think it's interesting that in terms of violence and food situations and sanitation, these things are happening all over these cities. But the focus is on this one area where there's public demonstrations that the cities are focusing on and using as a reason or an excuse to try and eliminate them and squelch public dissent. So I think it highlights the fact that we have this disconnect between democracy, and we're going to support democracy over there, but we're going to try and keep a little bit of a handle on it here because we're not sure where it's going.
Well, I had read that in New York City, Mayor Bloomberg had his people in the government tell homeless people that were being released from jail to go to Zuccotti Park. And so on the one hand, you have the mayor of New York City moving the homeless and the mentally ill from the prisons, from the jails, into Zuccotti Park, and then saying, hey, Zuccotti Park is unsafe, it's a mess, there's homeless people there, there's mentally ill people there, we've got to go in there and take it down. So in a way, they helped create the very pretext then to destroy the camps.
And at the same time, the fixes for some of our budgetary problems are to cut social services for the homeless, for mentally ill people, for people out of jails. I watched a documentary recently about Florida, the state of Florida, and a program that was started because there were so many families that had children in the school systems who were living in their cars and vans and trucks because they were homeless.
Oh, that was on 60 Minutes.
Yeah, and that this program was set up to try and help these people. And the government, these people are throwaways. And as the rest of our society moves on, and everybody tries to hang on to what they have, because at one point it was the lower end of the economic spectrum in this country that was hurting, and now it's the middle class. I mean, the tide, the tsunami is moving up the scale here. And the middle class is now the people who are losing their houses, losing their jobs, and losing their health care. And the government has had very little or no response to all these social needs and are cutting all these programs while it's full speed ahead with unbridled capitalism and a military budget that has no accountability.
Well, I saw that same program on 60 Minutes that you're referring to, and in that program they mentioned that 1/3 of all the homeless in America today are in Florida. So Florida is just overwhelmed with this reality because people have moved there, I guess, looking for jobs, thinking that Disney World and other places they can find work, but they're not finding it. But this is all a lot to do with this corporate drive to maximize profits by moving jobs overseas. A few years ago, I printed off this list of all the corporations that moved jobs overseas. And I got some of this poster board and I pasted onto the poster board all these jobs. And it took me 4 sheets of poster board to paste all these jobs that have moved overseas, millions and millions of jobs. And so when you do that, when the corporations move jobs overseas so they can increase their profits and they sort of leave us high and dry back here at home, guess what? What are we going to have?
And that's an example of how federal policy and legislation has moved power and money to corporations. Some of the free trade agreements that we've had with other countries have put American workers in direct competition with the cheapest labor forces in the world, and also left those labor forces without protections from their own governments about abuse and long hours and things like that. And it's allowed the corporations, U.S. corporations, to move those manufacturing jobs and production jobs from the U.S. to those countries outside the borders where the labor is really cheap and where there's no accountability there. And so we've been throwing jobs away. And the government has done nothing to close tax shelters around the world. We have corporations, even Google and Facebook now, are sheltering profits in the Cayman Islands. They're making billions of dollars that are not being taxed as U.S. corporations. It's part of that 9% of our revenues that are from corporations now. Most of it is being hidden or not accessible.
And at the same time, the Supreme Court said corporations are persons. They have unlimited right to influence our elections as much as they want. So as they're making all this huge money, not even paying taxes on a lot of it, they can then take that money and buy our Congress, which they have done lock, stock, and barrel, and influence taxation law and other environmental law and everything else.
Two points along those lines, if we have the time. C-SPAN did a show last week, I think it was, and there was a watchdog group, I don't remember the name of it, that keeps track of the monies that are given to Congress in terms of contributions. And as people move up in rank and become chairman of different committees, their contributions go up dramatically, and at the same time, their voting record in terms of the corporations and industries that they're regulating become more favorable to those industries. There are a couple of exceptions to the rule. Bonnie Frank is one exception, whose voting record was not skewed by the contributions that he received. And it's to see this happening on a day-to-day basis, and in public view, the mainstream media doesn't carry a lot of this information.
And why is that?
Because I think it's, as I mentioned before, we have corporations and industries, and the media is one of them, I think, that the number of companies and people who have control of the media get smaller and smaller and smaller, and fewer and fewer and fewer, and the control is held by a handful of people.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. Talk more about the connection, what I call the deadly connection, between endless war spending and our economic crisis here at home.
As I said before, our discretionary spending, the majority, I think it's 52 or 53% of our discretionary spending is spent on the military.
Actually, last I heard it was more than 56 cents out of every discretionary tax dollar. Yeah.
Well, that's because we don't really know, because there's the Pentagon, DOD has a budget that we know the amount that they get, but we don't know what the National Security Agency gets. We don't know what the CIA gets. We don't know what some of the FBI.
Black budget, the secret budget.
Yeah, absolutely. And we spend close to $1 trillion a year on the military. We have military bases in over 130 countries in the world. We have 900 to 1,000 military bases around the world. And a lot of that, if you look at why we're there or what we do there, it seems to be protecting capitalism more than it's protecting democracy or people.
That's an important point. Protecting the interest of the corporations so that they can control the resources, the oil. In the African continent, we're now moving into Africa. We've created this thing called AFRICOM, or Africa Command, to take control of the African continent so that we can control the extraction of resources. So our military is essentially becoming the arm of
foreign policy.
Corporate globalization, isn't it? Yeah.
We talk about protecting democracy around the world. The United States government has undermined democracy 4 times in 3 countries that I know of in our own hemisphere. Chile, Honduras, and Haiti. 3 popularly elected governments, democratically elected governments, were undermined and helped to overthrow by the U.S. government. In Honduras with Zelaya, and in Haiti with Aristide, twice with Aristide. Both of those presidents had announced attempts to make major changes in the minimum wage of people in their country. And shortly thereafter, they were both ousted from government.
Jerry, what can people do to stop this corporate takeover of our government and our economy?
I think we have to look back to what the founding documents of our country. The Declaration of Independence said that it's the duty of the citizens, when the government that's running the country over a long period of time has stopped to provide for the benefit and well-being of its citizens, that it's the duty of the citizens to rise up and say enough is enough. So that's been in our country's history since its founding days. And every now and then it happens. The war in Vietnam, the protests there were a good example of that, where people said enough is enough. We're going in the wrong direction. We are not being represented by our government. The government is not being accountable for the money it's spending and how it's taking money in and how it's being run. And it's our duty as citizens to become informed, become aware, and to participate in bringing the government to accountability for the actions that they do in our name.
We've got about a minute or so left. How about a wrap-up statement to the viewers, kind of a closing thought?
What I've seen in my brief experience with the Occupy movement is that for people to have an impact, or even to become knowledgeable about what's going on, they need to get informed. The information's out there, not through mainstream media, but the information is available if you look for it. And to talk to representatives, talk to state and local representatives, city councils, make your opinions known, and bring pressure to bear from the grassroots. This is not happening from the feds. It has to happen from the grassroots. We need, as a citizenry, to become informed, become aware, and to be active.
Well, Jerry, thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching another edition of This Issue. Until next time, good luck to you all, and please get organized.